In our first lesson, we'll discuss the idea development process, as well as how to take those ideas and implement them into the hero's journey story structure. Let's begin by talking about the 4 project phases. These 4 project phases, ideation, pre-production, full production, and post-production, are going to give us the roadside markers we need to charge a course on a journey from the first glimmerings of an idea to a finished game document. I believe there's a special phase right at the start of a project before pre-production where we can begin to figure out what kind of game we're going to make. The name of this phase for me is called ideation, and it's a long-standing part of the game design process. Now let's begin with brainstormings, which is an activity for both groups or you yourself as an individual, where we come up with ideas spontaneously or we write them down. It's good for generating long lists of ideas very quickly. Begin by setting a time limit. Rookie brainstormers often overlook this crucial rule. Brainstormers work best when they're short, roughly 20 minutes, forcing everyone to work fast, and 30 minutes is a good maximum. If you get on a roll, go longer. Time pressure in a brainstorm pays off in multiple ways, including helping you to focus on the next most important rule. Focus on quantity over quality. You're not going to come up with the right idea or the best idea during a brainstorm. You're just trying to capture all the ideas. You'll pick the best ones later. Encourage everyone to say the first thing that comes into their minds. If your team likes competition, set a goal to come up with more ideas than you've ever come up with before. However, this could descend into chaos if you don't appoint a facilitator. Put one member of the group in charge. They'll be tasked with moving things along, contributing ideas to get the brainstorming started, and making sure that only one person speaks at a time. This keeps the session energetic without becoming chaotic and gives the team members a chance to demonstrate respect for each other and develop trust. The facilitator should also make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak. Good ideas can come from anywhere, but some people might be reluctant to speak up. A good facilitator will notice this. When someone wants to contribute but is having trouble jumping into the conversation, so what they'll do is they'll make and hold space for their voice. The facilitator or someone else on the team should also be tasked with writing everything down. Capture all the ideas. Writing the ideas on a whiteboard where everyone can see them is good, but a shared online document or writing in a notebook is fine too. Every last idea is worthy of being recorded, no matter how obvious or weird it seems. Welcome unusual ideas. The weirder the better. This rule complements focus on quantity over quality. In a brainstorm, we're trying to get away from the familiar and into fresh territory. An idea that seems unworkably strange could later prove to be a source of brilliant originality and innovation. The facilitator should regularly remind everyone about this rule. To help break down the social resistance that we all have to saying things that seem silly or odd. Say yes and. Combine and improve ideas. This is a great way to keep things moving along, especially when your mind goes blank. Use the yes and technique. This is from improv comedy and theater. And by taking one of the early ideas and adding to it or modifying it, don't discuss the ideas during the brainstorm session. This rule is often very hard for analytic people like game designers to follow. We all want to start dissecting ideas as soon as we hear them, to see if they're any good. Don't do this during the brainstorm. The idea and the time for discussing comes later, but for now, we want to gather as much as we can. Next, let's talk about another useful tool called mind mapping. Mind mapping is a more structured version of brainstorming and works well when you've arrived at a core concept that you want to explore in great depth. The technique is very simple. Write down the core idea in the middle of a whiteboard, screen, or sheet of paper, and begin to brainstorm, following all the same rules described above. Each new idea should be connected to the core idea or to another idea that has already been written down. In the mind map, you want to make sure that every idea has an emotional or deep-rooted connection. A good example, of connecting both brainstorming and mind mapping to a core idea and plotting it out into a story structure is Joseph Campbell's hero journey. Now, in 1949, Joseph Campbell penned the book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Campbell claimed that the hero's journey is the natural basis of all stories, be they jokes, fairy tales, folklore, or myths. He coined the term monomyth after noticing that the vast majority of stories told over the ages and across continents followed the same overarching structure and contained the same types of characters. Now, let's talk a little bit about how to use the hero's journey to create your story. First, you want to create your hero. Forget about all the traditional implications of the word hero and let your imagination run wild. Your hero certainly does not need to be male or female, and they needn't be conventionally heroic, but they must inspire interest and sympathy in your readers. This means giving them at least some redeeming or intriguing traits. Next, give them a goal. Here's an important point. First and foremost, stories exist on a literal level. This means you need to design the fundamental arc of your story as soon as possible. The best way to do this is to send your hero on a real quest for a tangible goal. If you don't have a specific finished point in mind, you haven't defined your hero's quest clearly enough. Then set out the 4 quadrants of the story cycle. Take a bird's eye view of the hero's journey, and you'll see that it divides into what Campbell and Vogler call 4 movements. I found that these map quite nicely on the 3-act story structure by merging the middle 2 quadrants to make up the second act. Next, we have the call to adventure. This is where the hero is pushed out of their ordinary world. Sometimes they embark on their adventure freely, but most often they're ripped from normality by events. Then we have initiation. The hero crosses the threshold, often with the help of a mentor. You can think of Gandalf in Lord of the Rings or Hagrid in Harry Potter. The hero then leaves their ordinary world behind and starts facing the challenges this brings. Now we have transformation. This is where the hero faces the challenges and gains their reward. The challenges the hero faces ramps up a gear, and they don't necessarily defeat them all. At one point, the hero faces the ordeal, which tests them to their limits. Once they overcome the ordeal, they receive their reward. Then we have the return. This is where the hero returns to their old world, permanently changed by everything they've experienced, without committing really any spoilers, and many of the books from Stephen King and other alternate history novels follow this model. It is worth pointing out, though, that the return doesn't always happen, especially in tragic endings or in more literal novels. Now that you have this bit of information, I'm looking forward to reading not only your question responses, but your own stories that encompass the hero journey.